right, everybody. Thank you for joining us. We're going to be in Greg's book, What Did Jesus Say? On pages 50 and 51. So if you've got your book with you, you can turn to that in there, or if you want turn to your Bible, it's actually going to be in Matthew chapter 6 and 25 through 27. So a lot of people know this section. It's a real famous section of Matthew, Jesus' Sermon on the Mount, as it's called. And this is actually it's the Sermon on the Mount, say, pretty well known. This section here is pretty well known too. Chapter 6, verses 25 through 34. There, talking about worry and the things, kind of anxiety and things like that. So we're not going. If you're going to read through it, probably better to go ahead and read all those verses there to begin with, and then kind of come back to us where we're going to be in 25, 26, and 27. That's what those verses are the ones we're going to cover just for a few minutes here today. In Greg's book, he actually he breaks down the pages 50 and 51, just deals with those three verses, and then the next few weeks you'll kind of get to see the rest of it. But as a whole, it's good to read it as a whole too. But we're gonna break it down just into those three verses to begin with. You turn with me, Matthew chapter 6, verse 25, and always remember when it starts with the therefore, check back with what it was just talking about, because it's going to tie those together somehow. And you can look back on the verses right before that, and it's talking about you can't love God and money. He puts those in two, opposing forces here: material things, money, and God. So on the heels of him telling us that, he says, "So you remember, therefore, you can put so there if that helps you read that better." So right after verse 24 into there, he said, "You can't serve God and money. Therefore, so read it with me, verse 25. So I tell you, do not be anxious about your life, what you're going to eat or what you will drink, nor about your body, what you will put on. Is not life more than food, and the body more than clothing?" It's interesting. He has a rhetorical question, and each one of these verses today, you will see he's got a rhetorical question that we call him today. At the end, and it's kind of interesting. Greg uses this verse here to kind of talk about spiritual food, how it's not just about the physical things, but the spiritual. So when you read through his book, you can see that section. I'm going to focus on this question, because that's a good question. Jesus is asking, and usually a rhetorical question, the answer is obvious. It's usually real evident when you ask a rhetorical question that you don't have to answer it. People can just see it. It's evident, right? So when he says, "Is life not more than food, and the body more than clothing?" And I'm going to say this right here, that I believe that if you ask that question today to people, the answer is going to not be what Jesus was the rhetorical question he was pointing to here. The answer was obviously, of course, life is way more than food, way more than clothing. There's more to everything than that. But when you get down to it, what he's asking is it not just more than life than just what we got right here, this stuff? I mean, he said, the verses before was talking about stuff, money versus God. So he says, "Is not life more than stuff?" And if you ask most people in the world today, they're going to tell you, "No, this is all we got. I'm going to work. I'm trying to earn money so I can have this, so I can do that, so I can experience these things, and so I can have this bucket list check off that I can do, and I got to save for retirement." All these things that people get caught up in the world, and if you're not careful, we'll fall into that same trap where we're like, we gotta kind of chase those same things, and Paul kind of gives it in 1 Corinthians chapter 15. If you want to read about the resurrection and get a good grasp of that, verse chapter 15 of 1 Corinthians will give it to you. Go to verse 32, and this is what he says. He says, "Hey, look," in kind of referring to this question, he kind of uses the same principles here, talking about food and drink. Listen to it. He says, he's kind of giving you the more of the, hey, look, if we're not going to be raised from the dead, if Jesus hadn't been raised from the dead, and all this is just what we have, here's what we can see, then yeah, you might as well just drink. You might as well be merry. He said, "Eat, drink, be merry." He said, "That's fine. Yeah, that's what we got to do if that's all we have is here." So he's kind of giving you the split is the resurrection is what changes that. The resurrection of Jesus and now me, that changes that, right? But if we're not careful, we'll let the world kind of get us drifted into where we act like they do in this. And we'll get to that mindset to where we're thinking, yeah, it is just this stuff. Yeah, I know there's something coming later, but right now I got to focus on it. Jesus is giving us hey, look, it's more than that. Paul's saying it's more than that. And it's interesting how Paul, if you go to verse 33 right after that in 1 Corinthians 15, after he tells us that it's more, if it's just this life is just for now, and all we get is what we got now, we're not going to be, and when we die, it's all over. He says, "Eat, drink, be merry," and then right after that, he says, "Hey, bad company corrupts good morals." You know what he's saying? Don't let the world turn your focus and mess you up, because that's what they're thinking. That's the way they see it. We got to think differently. All right, let's keep rolling. Verse 26. This one here, this is interesting. You can imagine Jesus out, if it truly was a sermon on a mount out in the open, in nature and seeing things. He's talking about this, and then all of a sudden he says, "Look at the birds." There probably were birds there, right? Listen how he says it. Look at the birds of the air. They neither sow nor reap nor gather into barns, yet your heavenly Father feeds them. Here's you another rhetorical question: Are you not more valuable than they? So another rhetorical question. It's obvious, like, yeah, even someone that wouldn't have a belief in the Creator and the belief that we're all made in God's image as people, they still have to recognize a hierarchy. Man, if He's taking care of them, wouldn't He think He'd take care of us? The value there, and that's something that. It's a simple question, but sometimes I think we might forget that. Oh yeah, He's taking care of them, but He's not taking care of me. We'll fall into that trap. So. And look at this last one. This kind of help us tie it together. Verse 27, at least of our study today, tie it together. Verse 27, and which of you being anxious can add a single hour to his lifespan? Some versions there, depends on what manuscript they translate from. Some of them, the older ones, will give you, can add a cubit to his stature, or can add inch to his height. Which one of you can be worried about it and add a minute to his lifespan or an inch to his height? An obvious rhetorical question again, even today. Those first two that we heard in 25 and 26, you have people today, you might get some odd answers. Every sane person is going to tell you, yeah, of course, worrying is not going to get you another hour on your life. In fact, it might probably take them away, right? But it's definitely not going to add height to you. And that's, Greg had a good, and on page 51 there, I thought he had a good line right after that. And when he said, worry, let me say it right, worry is no peacemaker. It's powerless, right? You think you're doing something. I think sometimes when something's out of our control and we're worried about it, we think somehow that worry is like, okay, I can't do anything, but I can do this. Man, you talk about worthless, fruitless, powerless. He says, worry is no peacemaker. And we'll end with this right here. I think that one of the deals that I have to do is, when someone says, when those waves come in your life where it just hammers you with something, we have friends and folks in our family at church right now that's battling COVID. It's got, all kind of things and anxiety. When that anxiety level starts rising in your life, it feels like it's gripping your throat. It's easy when somebody from the outside to come in and say, hey, don't worry. And looks at these verses and says, hey, don't be anxious. Don't worry about this. And it's like, now, how am I going to do that? Because it's hard to just let something go and not have something else. So we have to, the way that Jesus and His Word teaches us is not just to don't worry. And in today's world, don't worry, be happy. It's don't worry, have faith. Don't worry, trust. So one of the things we can do right here is go back to this section and read this to yourself. Read it like Jesus is talking, just you and Him, when you're having those moments when the anxiety level's high and the heart rate's up and all those things are happening. Read these things and ask those rhetorical. Think about Him reading those and saying those rhetorical questions to you. Are you not more valuable than they? Is not life more than this? Is worrying about this going to do anything? Obviously not. And it's easy to say right now when worries are low, when the pressure's down, and we're not on that red line on our RPMs when things are getting shaky. But we got to have those faith that His Word will overcome that the Spirit inside us can overcome that. All right, guys, that's all I got today. I appreciate y'all. Thanks again, Greg, for the book. Thanks for watching. We'll see you soon.